Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to another edition of Crimes of the Week International. Representatives from Australia's New South Wales Police say that a 55-year-old man is successfully in custody this week after he fell off a roof during the middle of a tense standoff, one which was prompted by a fatal stabbing at the same property which he is accused of carrying out. The whole thing began at around 4:30 p.m. on February 22nd when police were called about a violent incident at a residence on Gunaganu Road in the town of Tamworth. Officers arrived to find the 47-year-old homeowner, Richard Garland, inside and bleeding from serious stabbing injuries to his head. As emergency responders attempted to treat Richard for his injuries, it was discovered that there was another person inside the home. That man, 55-year-old Peter Nielsen, had locked himself inside of a bedroom. Before officers could force their way in, though, Nielsen escaped and climbed out onto the roof with a knife. Police called in backup from the force's tactical squad, and the scene was quickly secured. However, Nielsen was uncooperative. The situation soon turned into a standoff, with officers trying a variety of methods to try and get the 55-year-old down. Tasers and beanbag rounds were fired at Nielsen, though he appeared unfazed. Dramatic footage taken during the incident also shows him throwing tiles at police and pushing away ladders as they attempt to make their way onto the upper part of the roof where he is standing. The situation finally came to an end when one of the officers, who was equipped with a riot shield, managed to make his way up to this part of the roof. As Nielsen ran to the other side, he lost his footing, first falling to the lower portion before rolling off entirely onto the ground. Once there, he was quickly restrained and taken to a hospital to be treated for injuries, including self-inflicted knife wounds. While Nielsen is now recovering, sadly, the same cannot be said for Richard Garland. The 47-year-old homeowner was pronounced dead after being taken to Tamworth Hospital. At the time of this recording, not much else is known about the case or why it all happened, though it's been reported that Richard and Nielsen were longtime friends. Police say that among other things, they are investigating whether drugs were involved in the deadly situation. Currently, Nielsen has not been charged, though that is expected to change in the coming days. Authorities in the Indian state of Uttar Pradesh say that a 26-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder this week after he allegedly lured his former boss and neighbor into a deadly trap, a crime that police say was motivated by greed. The whole thing began on February 18th, when police were contacted by the concerned brother and father of 26-year-old Ankit Panchal. The men explained that their neighbor, 34-year-old Deepak Kumar, had gone missing, and they had uncovered disturbing evidence suggesting that their family member could be involved. When officers arrived at their home to investigate, the brother and father led them to Panchal's room, which was located on the ground floor. There, they were shown an area of tile underneath the 26-year-old's bed, which looked like it had been recently disturbed. After moving the bed and pulling away the flooring, police could tell that a hole had recently been dug there. They excavated the area, and after making it nearly 5 feet down, they were met with a chilling discovery. It was Deepak's body. He had been brutally beaten to death. Further evidence, including traces of blood around the room, was also found. Authorities managed to track down Panchal the following day as he was reportedly getting ready to flee the area. At the time, he was in possession of a sizable amount of cash, a shovel, and a blood-stained iron rod, the latter of which is now believed to be the murder weapon. During subsequent questioning, Panchal allegedly explained that he used to work for Deepak, who was both his longtime friend and neighbor, at his interior design business. About a year and a half ago, he had quit to start his own company, and while this initially caused a rift between them, eventually they managed to patch things up. This is why Deepak had trusted Panchal when he asked him to come over for drinks on the evening of February 17th. Panchal stated that he was the equivalent of roughly $4,100 US in debt, but that he knew Deepak had nearly 3 times this amount in savings. After luring his former boss and friend to his home, he waited until he let his guard down before he and 2 other accomplices ambushed him. After stealing his phone and obtaining the information they needed to access his bank account, Panchal confessed that he'd beaten Deepak to death. When the murder was finished, he and the 2 accomplices dragged his body downstairs to the hole that they had pre-dug underneath his bed. They believed by hiding the 34-year-old's remains here, the crime would go undiscovered. Afterwards, they immediately began splitting up and spending the dead man's money. At the time of this recording, Panchal reportedly remains in custody and is expected to face murder charges soon. Police say that they are still on the hunt for the 2 others involved in the crime. A French man has reportedly found himself in quite the bizarre situation after he was recently the victim of a theft, only to discover that the same people that had victimized him might be in a position to provide him with a sizable payday. The whole thing began on February 3rd, when the victim, identified only as Jean-David E., returned to his car in the city of Toulouse to find that it had been broken into. Thieves had forced their way inside the vehicle, making off with his backpack that also contained his wallet. Things got even more annoying for Jean-David when he called his credit card company and learned that the culprits had already used his card to make contactless payments at a convenience store close to the crime scene. However, that's when the case began to take a strange turn. After traveling to the store in person to speak to employees and see if they knew anything about the thieves, a cashier told Jean-David something he never expected. The staff member said that yes, he definitely remembered them. The 2 unknown men, who appeared to be homeless, had bought some cigarettes and a bunch of scratch cards. One of those scratch cards happened to be the winner of a €500,000 jackpot. Upon learning this, Jean-David contacted police, who in turn reached out to the local lottery and gaming commission, known as the FDJ. The FDJ said that the men had not yet tried to claim the prize, but if they did, they would not be eligible since they had used a stolen credit card to make the purchase. However, on the flip side, Jean-David couldn't claim the prize, since he both didn't have the winning ticket and wasn't the one that had purchased it. Here's where things get really crazy. Essentially, Jean-David is now in a situation where neither he nor the criminals can claim the €500,000 on their own. But if they were to work together, there's a chance they could split the prize. Jean-David is now suggesting that this is exactly what they try and do. In interviews with local media, he said he's willing to let bygones be bygones, so long as the thieves come forward with the winning scratch ticket and agree to split the funds 50-50. He noted that it could be a win-win. He could pay off his mortgage, and the men could each get enough money to turn their lives around. Unfortunately, there's one more wrench thrown into all of this, and that's the final term and condition associated with this scratch ticket. According to FDJ rules, the prize has to be claimed within 30 days of the purchase date. That date is fast approaching, but Jean-David is hoping that by getting the story out, he can reach the thieves and show them he is serious. He stated during an interview, quote, "Unless they contact my lawyer, the ticket is unusable, so why not settle amicably and do 50-50? For that amount of money, I'm ready to come to an agreement." Authorities in the Brazilian state of Sao Paulo say that a 22-year-old man has been arrested this week following his chilling alleged confession in the brutal murder of his neighbor, a woman who they say he was obsessed with. The disturbing situation began sometime on February 22nd, when the brother of 31-year-old Aline Cristina Giacomeshi went to her house in the municipality of Registro. The brother had traveled there to check on his sister after he and other family members became concerned that no one was able to reach her. This behavior was completely out of character for Aline. The 31-year-old was a hard-working administrative manager at a local bank branch and was normally very communicative and responsible. Finding Aline's home quiet, the brother jumped the wall of her property and made his way inside. What he found was heartbreaking. Aline's partially clothed and lifeless body was in her bedroom. Though reports contradict each other as to whether she was found on the bed or the floor, what we do know is that she had been the victim of a brutal attack. Authorities concluded that she had been sexually assaulted before dying of asphyxiation. Upon launching an investigation, police quickly turned their attention to a 22-year-old man in Aline's neighborhood identified only by the name William. Though he initially denied any involvement, that changed when authorities discovered forensic evidence and CCTV footage linking him to the crime. Following his arrest 3 days later, on February 25th, William reportedly offered a full confession. Police now say that the disturbing details he provided revealed that he had an obsession with Aline. The 22-year-old had memorized her daily schedule and was stalking her. He allegedly killed Aline because she did not share the feelings he had for her. At the time of this recording, William remains in custody and formal charges against him are expected to follow in the coming days. Authorities in Taiwan say that a man was officially indicted last week, almost exactly a year after he concocted a harebrained fake robbery scheme in order to get a free ride across town. According to reports, the whole thing began at around 11 p.m. on February 26, 2024, when a man called police in Kaohsiung City telling them that he needed to report a crime. The man, identified by the last name Lai, claimed that he'd just been robbed by two people on a white motorcycle who had taken off with his wallet. After responding to the call, officers picked Lai up and drove him to their station in Xiaogang district to file a report. However, as they began to look more into the situation, they realized that they'd been duped. You see, in addition to being his name, it turned out that Lai also happened to be an accurate way to sum up the story the man had told. Upon reviewing surveillance footage from the area he claimed to be in when he was robbed, police found no evidence of any crime. That's when Lai admitted he made the whole thing up. After being handed over to prosecutors, the man attempted to get creative, saying that he suffered from a nervous system disorder that made him think he'd been robbed. But authorities say eventually he revealed the much more simple and much more stupid truth. He had reported the fake robbery because he wanted a ride across town, but he didn't have money for a taxi. Last week, Lai was officially indicted for making a false accusation and is now awaiting further proceedings. Unfortunately, local media sources do not specify what penalties prosecutors are seeking against the floundering freeloader. Authorities in the English county of Northumberland say that a bumbling career criminal was sentenced to jail time last week after he was linked to a string of burglaries late last year thanks to the inventive actions of one of his would-be victims. According to reports, the whole thing began in November of 2024 when an unidentified homeowner from the town of Blyth became fed up with his property being broken into. Tired of feeling helpless, he came up with a low-budget but clever solution. Using a bucket and a length of fishing line, he set up what has been referred to as a Home Alone-style trap. Essentially, he filled the bucket with water and placed it on his garden wall, running the fishing line across a nearby path that led to his back door and window. On November 9th, the man went outside and noticed that the trap had been set off. Using this as an indicator, he checked his surveillance cameras and came across this footage. The video shows a man prowling around the back of the homeowner's property. As he heads towards the back door, he trips the bucket trap, soaking his shoes and creating enough noise and movement for the nearby floodlights to come on. The burglar is so startled that he flees the scene immediately. While the man had his face covered in the footage, when the homeowner turned it over to police, they were quickly able to identify him. His name is Paul Howell, a 56-year-old career criminal with more than 100 previous convictions. Howell was arrested about a week after the November incident, though unfortunately by that time he'd victimized at least one other family. Unlike in the bucket trap incident, frustratingly he was able to get away with several $100s worth of the victim's items and valuables that time. That being said, the evidence at the crime scene did help to build the case against him. On February 17th, Howell was convicted of attempted burglary and was sentenced to 3 years and 7 months in prison. Authorities in Germany say that they are investigating the aftermath of an alarming crime this week, following a knife attack at one of the country's most important monuments, an incident that is believed to have terror-related motives. The awful situation unfolded on the evening of February 21st at the Berlin Holocaust Memorial. The site, which is officially called the Memorial to the Murdered Jews of Europe, is considered one of the most important monuments of its kind in the country and is located in the heart of the capital, close to the Brandenburg Gate and the German Reichstag, or Parliament building. According to reports, at around 6 p.m., a 19-year-old Syrian national, later identified by the name Wassim al-M, arrived at the site armed with a knife. Once there, he allegedly walked up behind a 30-year-old Spanish tourist, attacking him and slashing his throat before fleeing. Emergency responders were quickly called to the violent scene, where they found the victim suffering from extremely serious injuries. The man was rushed to a local hospital where he underwent emergency surgery and had to be placed into a medically induced coma. Miraculously, though, he survived, and medical personnel say that his life is no longer in danger. As this was happening, police set up a heavy presence near the crime scene and began extensive searches of the area. This paid off roughly 3 hours later when the suspect was located and taken into custody. He was apparently spotted with blood on his hands, and following his arrest, officers found a blood-stained knife in his possession, as well as a prayer rug and a copy of the Quran in his backpack. Because of these details, as well as the significance of the area where the crime took place, authorities immediately suspected that the crime had terror-related motives. This was allegedly confirmed by the 19-year-old during questioning when he told police that he wanted to kill Jewish people and had been planning to do so for weeks. After further investigation, police learned that Wasim had come to Germany as an unaccompanied minor from Syria when he was 17. At the time, he said that he was fleeing violence from the country's civil war and was granted asylum status. Up until this week, he had been living in refugee accommodations in the city of Leipzig, roughly 100 miles away from where the knife attack took place. Authorities there said that Wasim was known to them, but only for petty offenses such as theft. Following the news of the incident this week, Germany's interior minister called for swift and severe punishment for the 19-year-old suspect, saying that he should be removed from the country immediately whenever he is released from prison. At the time of this recording, Wasim remains in custody on charges of grievous bodily harm and attempted murder. Officials in France say that one person is dead this week and multiple police officers are injured following a terrifying knife attack that is said to be an act of terror. The incident took place on the afternoon of February 22nd in the eastern city of Mulhouse, located close to the French borders with Germany and Switzerland. It reportedly unfolded in a busy market area of the city where an organized demonstration was taking place in support of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. While it seems few details have been released about the actual attack itself, what we do know is that it began around 4 p.m. when the suspect, a 37-year-old Algerian national identified as Brahim Abdesamed, started stabbing people while armed with a screwdriver and a knife. According to witnesses, he shouted Allahu Akbar, or God is the greatest, several times both before and during the attack. Though the situation was quickly brought under control, sadly, in that short time, the suspect was still able to inflict a devastating amount of violence. 7 police officers were wounded, and a 69-year-old man who attempted to intervene was killed. The deceased victim has now been identified as a Portuguese national named Lino Luero. Most of the injured police officers were not seriously wounded. However, at least 2 needed to be hospitalized. One of these victims is apparently still receiving treatment for a stab wound to the neck. In the aftermath of the deadly incident, French officials said that they had no doubt that this was a religiously motivated act of terror. In subsequent statements, they revealed that Abdesamed had arrived in the country illegally in 2014 and that he was on a terror watch list at the time of this week's incident. In fact, the 37-year-old had previously served jail time for, quote, promoting terrorism following the October 7th attacks in Israel. In addition to this, however, officials pointed out that the 37-year-old's mental health was likely an aggravating factor. As part of proceedings for the previous offense I just mentioned, Abdesamed was reportedly assessed as having a, quote, schizophrenic profile. Still, according to France's interior minister, the 37-year-old should never have been in the country in the first place. In statements this week, the minister said that Abdesamed was the subject of a deportation order and that they had tried to remove him from France at least 10 times. However, Algeria had refused to accept him. At the time of this recording, the 37-year-old suspect remains in custody, though it is unclear if he is yet facing formal charges. Police say that they also arrested 3 other people allegedly associated with Abdesamed, though it appears no further information has been provided about these arrests. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a second to give a huge shout out to everyone who has made it this far into the video. Seriously, thank you so much for watching. If you found today's upload interesting and informative, we'd be honored if you'd consider liking and subscribing, as well as hitting the notification bell and selecting all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to help support the channel, we'd love to have you join us over on Patreon. Patrons get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. You can learn more at patreon.com/crimezone, where you'll also find some of the fine folks whose names are currently on screen. All that being said, we understand that not everyone has the means to support financially, and that's totally okay. We appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much everyone, and take care.